take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining me today. Super excited that you've chosen to stop by today. Feel free to jump right over to your favorite social media of choice, whether that be Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find us there at OPS Podcast Show. And of course, our main website where all the exciting things happen is opspodcast.com. So a little different than the socials. Speaking of some excitingness, does anybody still get excited when they hear this sound? Well, today my guest, I really feel like is knocking on that door of our heart. In fact, let me introduce you to him right now. He's all about personal growth. In fact, he says this: personal growth is something we all seek, but spiritual renewal is something our soul yearns for, whether we know that or not. As a gifted storyteller, a sought-after professional speaker, knowledgeable teacher, and author on the more important thing of spiritual growth and renewal in our everyday life, he wants to empower others with the biblical guidance needed for deep spiritual reflection. Help me welcome him in from the great metropolis of Louisville, Kentucky, Robin T. Jennings. Robin, how are you today?
I'm doing great, except for technology. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, Neil. That was a warm introduction.
But hey, man, I'm happy you're here today. I'm happy we got to connect. When you meet somebody and you kind of have that first impression, especially when it's over the phone, I got to be candid with you in this moment. I know I like to be silly and kind of tease in some respects, but man, I really felt like we had this like simpatico-like puzzle piece connection. Am I fabricating that in any way?
No, we were brothers.
Did you feel that as well? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. And then you started talking about my Tar Heels, and I was like, wait, how do you hang up on somebody on an iPhone? Like I had to like phone a friend almost in the background. Like I don't want to hang up on this guy, but I almost want to hang up on this guy because I can't believe you were being so mean to my heels.
It's rough. It's just tough, and they've not done Kentucky any favors over the years.
No.
Much less Louisville. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sure people didn't come here to talk about our hoop fandom or our obsession with, all things Louisville or Louisville. I don't know. We're going to have to correct me all day long, I'm sure. Right. But my question for you leading off this time together, I really want to get into is this: what size shoes do you wear?
Well, that's a real good question, Neil, because right now I'm in slippers and they're from LL Bean. They're really warm. And did you know we've been inside with COVID for the last 2.5 years? These slippers are dirty. They're old. I don't even know what size they are. Probably medium. What else do you want to know?
Like you're like in this bunker compound.
That's right.
Like
that's
you
right.
haven't even ventured out in any way.
I'm older. I don't want to go outside.
I'm so old.
I'm afraid of outside.
Yeah. The sun. Oh, it's so blinding.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
But thanks for asking.
You're welcome. Absolutely. I'm glad you're well. I'm glad you dropped LL Bean. Like that's like we even answered the next question, which of course, what style and brand. So we know it's LL Bean. That's fun. Have you found the right slippers though? Have you had to jostle between some or anything like that?
Well, I won't go into great details, but I also have a 1-year-old puppy that chews things, and particularly my slippers and the laces on my slippers. So I have to replace. Have you ever tried to replace laces and moccasins? Real task, but I've done it 2, 3, 4 times. And each time the laces get longer and I trip over them. And anyways, I've told you more than you want to hear about these moccasins, but I like them. They're mine.
Well, I have a friend of mine, his name's Sean Hankin, and he says often we have to walk in other people's moccasins, which is kind of like an homage to what we say, walking in other people's shoes. But he said that to me one day when we were out selling together. He said, Neil, you really should start telling people you're walking in other people's moccasins. And I was like, Sean, you're a genius. Like, that's brilliant. And I'm not talking Sean in Texas. There's too many Seans in my life. I need to maybe narrow that down anyway. Robin, getting into you and your story, we're asking people this question. Speaking of shoelaces, great segue, by the way, is this idea of an aglid. Now to help, again, because people are still like troubled by this, like guests, listeners, they're like, what is an aglid? I'm like, how do people not know this? It is the plastic thing or plastic or metal thing at the end of the shoelace that keeps it from unraveling. And without that aglid there, you can't really, to your point, lace up the eyelids,
Sure.
to get it back going again after little puppy sport there had chewed on.
Yes.
If this one thing wasn't in your life, would your life have been unraveled? And if so, what's that one thing?
Okay, now we're getting serious. Obviously, it's my faith. And I'm a minister, retired from active parish ministry, now doing an awful lot of writing and speaking and teaching and going around. And that has been a wonderful, and it's not necessarily a second vocation, as some people might say, or an encore or one of these kind of things, but it really is an opportunity for me to really put out on paper as well as communicate what has been important in my life. This is where you're tapping into this anglet and could, yes, talk about unraveling, but I'd rather talk about getting, again, my act together. And that really comes through my faith in Jesus Christ, who, and I hesitate to say just turned my life around, really gave me a new life. And with that said, and again, I don't want to be cliche here and say the rest is history, but with that said, provided, again, the opportunity to, with grace, a deeper understanding of grace, which for me also is not just being saved, restored necessarily, as it is a sense of having the strength or the courage to make the kinds of changes that needed to be made in my life.
But listen, I mean, so many people out there, I think, in this world have a concept of who Jesus
Sure.
is. I mean, he's this historical figure. Some
Sure.
have said, okay, maybe he was a prophet. Some would maybe even call him a bigot or a lunatic. I've heard people say that.
That's correct.
They've said, well, he's just angry. Others have said he's a great teacher. Others have said, oh, he's a humanitarian. He's a philanthropist.
Yeah.
He was homeless.
Yeah.
There's so many adjectives. I think that's the right word. I'm not an English major, but I think I got that right.
It's all right.
There's so many adjectives that we could use to describe Jesus. But if I were going to ask you that question, Robin, how would you describe Jesus for you? Your answer would be what?
Divine, quick and simple and dirty. When you say he's angry, how would you do with someone pounding nails into your hand? I get the emotions and the range of emotions. I don't know if you're familiar with the author Dallas Willard. He was a professor at the University of Southern California. Very, very profound philosophical thinker, but theologian and biblical scholar as well. Heavy duty kind of guy, but often would say, Jesus is the smartest man I know. And I'm going, are you kidding? Unpack that thought. Where he's going with this is, okay, tell me who's smarter. And I'd say, oh, Einstein, or, any of the Bill Gates, the guys that we're talking about today, done these wonderful technology stunts that have changed the world. Aren't they the smartest? Well, look who's really still at it and still working in our lives and still the one whom we follow. And another thing Willard would say, and I don't mean to just be quoting him, but since this question comes up as far as describing Jesus, not only is he the smartest man I know, because here again, as you start to unpack his words and his phrases and his parables, his teachings and his life and those that were under his influence, here again, we follow him. I think this is when you asked the question to me about the anglet and getting myself back together, it really came with a deeper sense of calling. And for me, this whole understanding of being called, I used to think was back in my days like the phone ringing, the telephone. Hello, who is it? What does it mean to be called? I didn't get it. I mean, I was very literal and very simplistic in thinking. And then along comes this one verse, really to Andrew and Peter, follow me. Hello, just follow me. And that's the call, is to follow him. Well, once you follow him, man, you're off and running on a whole new life in Christ. Back to your question, the one word to describe him, would be divine, because he leads me to God and he is God who's made man.
I think so many people, for whatever reason, they're not grabbed by the divine. They're not curious about the divine.
Mm-hmm.
They're almost dismissive towards the divine.
Uh-huh.
Again, all those things that I used to describe him that I've heard others say. In that, I've had Sunday school teachers as they're retelling in my younger years growing up in the church, and they're walking us through the crucifixion, they're walking us through Passion Week. They're almost in tears as they're walking us back through that, or retelling. I think the word is orality, retelling of the scripture. They're in tears. I never could get around that emotion. I could never get around any of that when I was a kid. It really wasn't until Mel Gibson came out with The Passion of the Christ.
Oh boy. Yeah.
That I walked out of that theater. We went to a restaurant afterwards, and our pastor led this discussion. He said, what's everyone feeling? What's everyone thinking? And my answer was, I'm mad.
Yeah.
I'm mad. And he said, okay, everyone else is like teary-eyed. Everybody else is like crying and kind of gathering themselves. I'm mad. And he said, why are you mad? And I said, I'm mad because a God that is so amazing, a God that can make a kangaroo, a God that can make a sunset breathtaking, leaving me breathless, a God who can create life in a woman, can do all of that, and yet send his own son to die what he died, to walk what he walked. I'm mad at him.
Yeah.
Jesus should never have gone. And he said, you do know if he doesn't go, you don't get to go. So you say he's smart. That was your word.
Right.
And divine. I don't think that's smart. I don't think that's overly divine. I'm pushing on that.
No, that's fine. And I say that's fine. Sure. That's real good, Neil. Work all that through. First of all, if you don't hold to anything that's divine, then what do you hold on to? And, you got to help me with that. This really is a discussion or a conversation that you want to have with people, because you're going in at a personal level, talking about, again, something like the cross. And I'm not trying to turn it into a metaphor or a symbol. It was, like you're saying, and pretty awful. But I think many of us have been through pretty rough and awful experiences in life where we can talk about hardship, where we can talk about grief. And again, the idea, God suffering with us. I mean, I could flip the switch back immediately to 9/11. I could go to Ukraine right now. And I'm not, again, glossing over the ugliness of this world. Let's call it sin for what it is, where we're separated from God. But here again, my focus and my attention is on Jesus, who, and I hesitate to say took the pain, because I think there again, you would say, well, what kind of guy is that who would take the pain? Well, it's a guy who sacrificed. Here again, when you, not just to play with words, but when you take a word like sacrifice, it is the same, derived from the same word as sacred, sacramental and sacrificial. And all these words start to come together. Then you throw in something like marriage. Would you throw yourself in front of a bus for your wife, Neil?
Yes, I would.
I'm not trying to get extreme on this or really, or overly, dramatize it to a way that, but how do you not dramatize? Because you started it with this conversation, and it is, you're going right to the depth of passion. I'll tell you, sad, tragic time in our life with my wife when our eldest son died of cancer, diagnosed at age 35, died just before turning 40. And, you walk away just not the same. And we still aren't. With that said, I bring this up because I was leading a group to Italy. We were following the saints and all this kind of thing. It was a wonderful excursion, but we went into the Basilica of St. Peter there in the Vatican, and there we saw the Pieta. And I don't know if you've seen pictures of it or if you've ever seen it, but Michelangelo's Pieta, where Mary's holding Jesus. And both of us just stood there. By the way, there was 50 people with cameras taking pictures and all that stuff, but still we were focused on that and speechless. We couldn't talk. We walked away and both of us were just kind of stunned by the Pieta, which has to do with a sense of piety, again, playing with words. And if that's your idea of pious, oh my gosh, it's as rough again as you can get, a mother holding her son. However, what we saw with that is there, even at that point of not only just Mary's suffering, but our suffering, God is with us at that moment and still at work, doing amazing work for life with God, life that never ends. Am I preaching or are you with me? Okay.
No, you're totally fine. First off, going to Italy, high five, like it's on the list. I want to get there. So a little mad that you got to go, but maybe one day. I'm picturing you. I don't know what your bride looks like, but I'm picturing you guys just standing there, just an awestruck wonder, especially post walking through what you must have walked through with your son, and to know that you have to have a hope. You have to have eternal perspective in mind that maybe he would have been on the trip with you. I don't know. To know that one day she will be able to hold him again, she being your wife. And you have to believe in the divine for that to happen.
Yeah.
And so I wonder about that for so many, and maybe you could speak to this specifically, is why do you allow the divine to still hold on to you, even though he's hurt you, even though he's maybe at times left you, maybe in your perspective, like, why didn't he show up here? You know, going back to my word, mad. Maybe you have been mad at him sometimes. And is it okay? Sure. You're spiritual. Sure. You're a pastor. You're, a minister. Is it okay to be mad at the divine? For you? Well,
here again, now you're dipping into my life at a deeply personal level, but at the same time, I think I can, and I'm not saying generalize about this, but I'll put it to you like this. I often, during that time, would get people to say, have you found closure? I hope you found some closure. Well, Neil, that's nice to say that. Boy, I don't want closure. I don't want to close the book on my son. I don't want to close that door. I don't want to close his story. I want it open. You see, closure is not the last thing, but again, is I'm looking at Mary and the Pieta holding Jesus. There's a sense of kind of the last thing on our mind is this sense of God. I mean, because all we're experiencing really is pain. Our life has been shattered. So it's not even like we're crying out for God at that point. It's just like, it's the proverbial knee in the gut. I mean, you're just standing there looking at it. That image, again, of suffering and grief and loss is really the one thing we do hold on to. And then with that does come really even though the last thing is God, God becomes then the first thing from the standpoint here of that's all we have left to hold is God. Am I making sense here? I mean, with you? And it's not a sleight of the hand or a trick as much as you've lost, but now you've found, and you found a new and a deeper understanding of God. Let me put it this way. Think, you're a minister. You've got a direct line. You can easily connect with God, all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? No answer. The line is busy. It's like you and me communicating just a while ago when my mic didn't work, hello? Okay, fine. So now what? I am human. And there is that sense of and maybe this is true with people of faith. I'll go this far with it. It's not that we expect not to get hurt. We do like to be protected. We all do. Have this shield around us or this Teflon coating or whatever. But that's not God. That's not God. That's kind of our own desire to be secure or have some sense of security. But God does surround us in a way that, yes, certainly there is that vulnerability. But at the same way, what we discover is we probably hurt more than other people do because not that God let us down, but because God is now leading us through the valley of the shadow of death. God is leading us and taking us into a life of a deeper transformation and a deeper understanding of life with him than we ever wanted to go. Trust me, this is not the direction I planned on going. And so then, yet here we are, off with God. And that's all we've got, by the way, is God, because we lost our son. So here I've got God, period. And I don't have that statue. I mean, it's made of marble in Italy, a place you want to go.
And they'd probably be mad if you took it.
Yeah, right. Well, you remember the crazy guy that tried to shoot it?
No, I don't. I'm going to have to look into this.
You probably weren't born. You probably weren't born then. Yeah.
Why you got to go there?
25, 30 years ago. No, some lunatic came in with a gun and started shooting it. So now it's enclosed in some kind of plexiglass or whatever.
But Robin, I think so much of my life, I'm going to put myself in your shoes for a moment, or your slippers, LL Bean.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could get into a medium. I got kind of a bigger foot. Like I wear an 11 in men's, so okay. Might be a little tough. And plus I'd have to give up the Jordans for a moment, which would be really hard. I know there have been times in my life where, again, I wanted the divine to show up. I begged the divine, Jesus, God, again. I don't know who the divine is for some, but for me it is Jesus. So I'll use him. I begged Jesus to show up. I wanted him to show up. It sounds crazy, but I feel like he didn't show up. So has there been a moment for you that you were like, man, if I get face to face with him, if I have that tea or Starbucks coffee with him in heaven, I want to ask him why you didn't show up here?
Well, there again, Neil, you're going in an area that, in one sense, my wheels are spinning because I could talk. I'm also associating much of what you said with prayer, too, is that it's like the unanswered prayer. Do you remember that? I don't know if it was Garth Brooks or you. Who said
It was Garth.
unanswered prayers?
I love that song.
There you go.
It was Garth.
Okay.
Sometimes
Stop. No, I'm the guy talking now.
Oh, my bad.
But say, the unanswered prayers really are answered. By the way, you know how long it takes to shoot a rocket to the moon or to Mars or whatever. I mean, sometimes our prayers, it may take some time to get there. Our time is not God's time. You know all that. I mean, there's all kinds of ways I could respond to it. Here again, it's the person I want to talk to, like you. I'd like to almost unpack that further in terms of being specific and what was it that where God did not show up at a certain point, but then maybe you perceive God at another point that then redeemed that point that where he seemed absent, he's now present, this kind of thing. And again, I hope you don't hear this as playing with words as much as what I'm steering away from, Neil, is for your listeners to hear God as like a bellhop, like you press the bell and he comes and gets your luggage and carries it for you. And then you give him a tip at the end of when you get to your room, providing he gives you the key. So, but that's not God. And so here again, I think part of this hurt that I was describing earlier, or this loss or this grief, again, the image of God that gets shattered on the cross for all of us, we then have to not rebuild, but then find God revealed in a new way. Now you can see I'm leading you to Easter, Neil, but that's the name of our game. I mean, that's where, again, to me, the divinity of Jesus comes so much into play, and the living Jesus, the earthy Jesus, the human Jesus. Yes, the healing stories. Did I not pray for my son to get healed? You better believe it. And pray and pray and pray. And big pharma and the doctors and hospitals all were doing all they could. So I can't get angry. I can't get mad at anybody, all that kind of stuff. People around me who said, I hope you're getting closure, all that. I'm not getting mad at. What I do walk away with is, there is such a thing as physical healing. There is such a thing as spiritual healing, where you learn something about, again, your relationship with God, and that gets healed. There is social healing where you learn to forgive people is important. I could start to go down the list. I really think there is this understanding of eternal healing, which is what, to me, this dimension of heaven or the kingdom of God speaks to in ways that is really, really very, like you said earlier, hopeful. And one of the things that keeps us moving forward in a direction that God continues to lead us. That here again, it's a blessing. Jesus died, or my son died, or this kind of thing. But the blessing is the life that we have with God that is never ending. Because remember, our buddy Jesus overcame or helped again restore us. When I use the word sin, I'm talking about being separated from God. There is no longer that separation. Sin is not just you're a bad boy, go to your room. That was kind of the old days. But, when we were in fourth grade and all that kind of stuff. Now we're talking about, for real, what happens when you feel you're alienated or you're separated from God. Well, this is where Jesus really comes in and speaks loud and clear.
I love what you're saying there, because I think so many times, I know in my walk, and I'm sure others have had the same type of experience, right? Where we want the bellhop type God. I've even heard it, the genie in the bottle, right? I make my 3 wishes, he gives me my wishes, but that's not a God I really want. Because even in my darkest moment, even in my depravity, maybe the enemy has gotten a hold of my mind to say, no, I really do want death today. And if God said, okay, if you want death, there it is. I'll give it to you. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want him to grant it, to quote Garth again. I can't even believe you quoted Garth. So high five for that. But to quote Garth, there are some times that it's okay. It's unanswered. And it's okay that if I don't know the answer to all of the questions. But Robin, if I'm going to be candid with you, I mean, let's be honest. You've studied extensively, not only in your, faith-based studies, but you've studied kind of the world and history and language. And I know words matter to you, and words are very important to you. And you know meanings of words and root words and all kinds of other word stuff. You're kind of a wordsmith in some ways, right?
Yes. And here's the reason why, if you really want to know, Neil. I took Latin in high school. And then when
they don't even offer that
I know.
now.
And then when I went to college, you had the choice. Back in our days, it was back in the the good old days with flowers in your hair and all that. And you got a choice. You could either take a language or math. Well, I had math phobia. And so I signed up for Latin again. And I had 2 or 3 free years of Latin, because when I say free, I don't mean 3. I mean free as in nothing. I didn't do a darn thing except but continue in my Latin studies, which was kind of a joke. That's why I like language. And I also, you're right, I was a history major, which interestingly enough, you put Latin and history together, and that does bring in then the studies with divinity.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is knowing a little bit of your background on that respect is why I'm saying that, is because I've heard so many people say, educated people, smart people, brilliant people, intelligent minds. I mean, you mentioned Bill Gates, you mentioned all these guys that are creating stuff, Einstein, I would mention Steve Jobs because I'm an Apple guy, right? I think
well, we talked about Elon
was brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, and we talked about Elon and the rockets, and I think he's a brilliant guy too.
Yeah.
I think he owns Twitter now. I'm not sure if that's official. Elon, you could follow me. I'm on Twitter, by the way, at OPS Podcast Show. Anyway, but my point is, with all of this, is how does somebody as brilliant as you are, as studied as you are, as educated as you are, still, some would say, you believe in a fairy tale?
Sure.
You believe in this mystical character that doesn't exist. My brother-in-law calls him my imaginary friend. How's your imaginary friend today?
Yeah.
What do you say to those skeptics out there for you that would say, no, it's more than just an imaginary friend. It's more than just this. Here's the why.
I would start with reality, and that it is real, that our faith is real. Faith is for me, as solid as the ground I'm standing on, or sitting on right now, is unshakable in that sense. And so people that want to throw rocks at it, I want them to be careful, because you're throwing rocks at you live in a glass house. Brother-in-law, tell me about what you believe in. Tell me about I want to hear who your brother's imaginary friend is. Brother-in-law, does he have an imaginary friend? Does he have a friend? By the way, what a friend we have in Jesus. So I can talk that talk, but I like dialogue. And I like to have conversations in ways that, go ahead, throw your best at me. The criticisms that are, and I want to say launched, like rockets almost sometimes against Jesus, where do they come from? What are they really about? Let's go to the source of whatever it is that is, for instance, I don't know your brother-in-law, and I hope he's not listening to your podcast, because he'll be banning you from his house forever. You take an agnostic. Well, that literally means I don't know. And he does not know. Okay, that's fine. You can be an agnostic, but tell me what you don't know. Tell me why you don't know. How come you don't know? You're a smart guy. Why don't you know? You see where I'm going with this? That again, it's this discussion. Could you imagine going to an airport and the agnostic comes to you and you say, "Good, hello, what flight are you on?" And he says, "I don't know." Or, "What airlines are you taking?" "I don't know." Where's gate 7? "I don't know." "Where are you going?" "I don't know." At what point do you want to say, "Stop it"? What do you know? And that's where I would be with your brother-in-law. He can go pick on me all you want, and I'll respond to him. But at the same time, I'm going to come back at him, because I really think the question is his.
Well, by definition, he calls himself an atheist.
Oh, well, that's great. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Okay. So there's no God.
He, in all sense of the word, is the most generous, most loving, most... You need the shirt off your back, he'll give you 2 of them.
The shoes for my feet. Neil, stop. Here's where I'm going with your brother-in-law, and we'll drop him in just a minute. But some of my best friends are atheists, okay? Where I'm going with this is, where did that love come from? You see, where does his sense of morality, of generosity, giving to other people, giving the shirt off his back, where does that come from? Was he born with that? I mean, if he's an atheist, he's just a bag of cells. He's a glob of nothing. So something got to him, gave him this sense of something that is good about life. And by the way, back to me and my words, remember I took Latin. Saying is good is derived from the same word as God. So when we start talking about, say, something like Good Friday. Why is Good Friday called good? Any kid will ask you. It's God's Friday. Good morning. It's God's morning. Good night. It's God's night. So it's early English, the early derivative of this, but it's important because here again, I think of a word like hope. It really has to do with something good. Something good is going to occur. That's what I hope, is that something good will occur. Now, I can get specific and I can talk about hope this afternoon where I get a Diet Coke after I'm through talking with you because my throat's dry. Or I can have something else later tonight. You see where I'm going, is that I can hope for all those things, or I can have a hope that, next year Louisville will beat, North Carolina. And, I can have those kind of hopes too, or I can have long-term hope, like hope for life forever with God. So, but it's good. It's always something good that will occur. And when you, again, add the word or translate it or derive it from the word God, I'm also hoping God. And that's back to your question again of why didn't God show up? Well, we have hope that God will be present at those places and points and times in our life where need be.
Well, first off, I think that's profound. And yeah, my brother-in-law does listen from time to time. He was a early sponsor of the show, talking about his generosity and his love for me. He's very encouraging. He always asks. He does. I believe he does.
He does love you.
He's never. I don't know if he's ever said it.
Where did that come from?
I mean, we've joked around about like loving each other and brotherly love. I did marry his sister, so I think he kind of has to.
I know. And by the way, he's about 50 or 60% of the world.
But I'm wondering about this because when I'm looking at the works that you've created that did not exist until you really put pen to pad or keyboard to words or however we do it nowadays, I don't know. I'm not an author. But one book of the three that really jumped out at me the most was The Door to Renewal.
Oh.
And the artwork on the book.
Yeah.
And I'm if people look, it's going to be in our artwork when we're featuring you. They're going to see this artwork. Cool. It's the one that got me the most excited. It is kind of I think it's, if I'm depicting it correctly, it is Jesus. It is the divine.
That's Jesus.
He's at the door. He's got his lantern because it appears to be, night or maybe even early dusk. Still the sun isn't out yet, and he's knocking at the door.
Yeah.
And I love that. So I don't know who did that for you, but kudos to them for doing that. But it's just a great depiction of, again, I think of the divine. But on that, what does that door for renewal for you look like? What did that look like for you? Because obviously you had to write this book, so you had to have some personal kind of perspective on it.
It's a real painting that you're looking at. And so I had to pay for it to get that put on my cover. But it's from Holman Hunt back in the 19th century. But he did that painting, and yes, that is Jesus, and he is knocking on the door, and it is a quote, Revelation. Revelation is really, people get all worked up over that, but it's John's casting a vision in a way that in chapter 3, he talks about Jesus knocking on the door, and whoever enters the door, he will come in and you will sup with him, and he with you. Have supper, obviously Eucharist, communion, one with another, and he will be in you and you will be in him. It's in St. Paul's Cathedral. I don't know if you've heard of St. Paul's Cathedral. And by the way, I don't do all this great traveling like I sound like Neil, but I got a sabbatical grant from the Lilly Foundation. It's out of Indianapolis, as in a lot of money. I won. It was like the lottery. My wife and I were used to just driving up and down the interstate do you remember Astro vans? We had an Astro van and 4 kids, fighting over McDonald's or Wendy's all the way to Florida where we would mooch off our parents. That was our idea of travel. You're still there? All of a sudden I get this huge gazumbo bunch of money to go for a sabbatical, which gave me the opportunity, me and my wife, the opportunity to travel without kids. How great is that? We were in St. Paul's Cathedral. The little guide was talking all about the history of the cathedral. I was following Anglican spirituality is where I was going with all this. In there, they're talking about Christopher Wren, who was the architect for the cathedral, and they're going back to the 14th, 15th, 16th century, then on up to the World War II, where the bombing of the Nazis on London. For whatever reason, the cathedral was spared. They continue to talk about this history. A lot of people asking questions and talk and all this kind of stuff. Then she starts talking about Princess Di and her wedding, and everyone's oohing and eyeing, and I decided to excuse myself. I'd had enough when they got into the wedding, So I go off to this side chapel And here's this painting. It's a life-size painting. I mean, like life-size of Jesus hanging on this wall. I'm sitting under it and I look up at it and I think that's really weird as you first look at that image. Then I see the little passage from Revelation that he's hand-scribed beneath it. So people like me get it. In other words, he's saying it's a caption like, Robin, you dummy. This is Jesus knocking on the door of your soul. Open it up. And I don't know if you looked at that picture closely, but there it is. And there's no handle on the outside of the door. You get it, Neil? It's on the inside.
I do.
Okay.
And I've always been blown away by that.
Okay. There you go. Do you see the weeds around the door?
Yeah.
The door hadn't been opened in a while.
Yeah.
Now, do you really want to know about me?
I do. Still do. Still
there I
hasn't
am.
changed.
There I am sitting there, not with a tear coming down my ear. Again, I'm not trying to be melodramatic here as much as I'm thinking, he's knocking on my door. He's knocking on my soul. Open the door. Let him in. It was one of these kind of personal encounters that, and by the way, when you're leading in the worship service, that's all you do is you talk and you gesture and you do all that kind of stuff. I'm never quiet. Here was the time, this sabbatical was a time for me to pull the plug and be quiet, experience some silence, some solitude, and to really pay attention and to let God have the word, had the floor. God wanted to say something to me. Now you probably want to know what it was. No, but it was open the door and let me in so we can now start. The word conversation is tied into conversion. So be careful when people want to have a conversation with you. So, I think, Neil, because here you go. But by opening the door, we had this conversation and there was this deeper sense of conversion. It's not that I wasn't a believer and I followed Jesus and all this in the first place, but now it's again, back to we were talking about with your brother-in-law. This is for real. I think you've seen that physical gesture before of where you kind of hold hands with God. God will hold hands with you forever. And if you let go, God will keep holding on to you. What was that kind of thing? I think for those maybe 5-10 years leading up to it, I was going through a lot of stuff in church, a little hassle, a little harried, big time type A, compulsive, OCD. What else do you want to hear about me? But on the go, workaholic, all those kinds of things, because it was all about me and my show and what I was doing. And Jesus said, hey, come on. And actually, in all seriousness, Neil, here was a word. It wasn't not only now, it was beyond sort of just follow me, but it was yoke yourself to me. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come on. And here's a guy who's burnt out and he's saying, come on, yoke yourself to me. Just try it. Follow me.
Well, first off, I think that's profound. I love all of what you said there because I think so many times, I know I struggle and I think others do too. It's the idea of slowing down.
Yeah.
It's the idea of giving him being the divine.
Yeah.
Giving him that space to come in and have a conversation with us, a conversion, which by the way, I never knew that.
So there you go. See, take Latin. Today. You need to take Latin, Neil.
No. I tried to take Spanish for a semester and I had to drop it to stay eligible for track. True story. If there was a word for you, maybe you've come across it, maybe it is Latin, I don't know. But if there is a word that really, when you hear it, when you say it, when you think about it, it invokes something in you like no other word. Is there such a thing, or am I just grabbing at something?
I'm a man of many words, Neil. And so to select one or to pick one is not easy off the top of my hat for you, except when I talk about being spent, burnout, and I don't want to make myself sound like a basket case, but frazzled, which is easy to do, where you try to pack 75 pounds worth of stuff into a 50-pound bag, and then you kick the bag because it's starting to split. That's me. That's the way I live. You'd love it. You'd love, I don't want to say if you were married to me because I got a wife. I can drive people crazy. I drive myself nuts. And so that's where, again, a word like discernment is important to me because that is a word that I picked up over the years. I'm really in a program, have been in programs of spiritual direction and to help people become attentive and aware of what were you thinking? What did you just say? Do you really mean that? To really raise those kind of inner questions. I do keep a journal. That's kind of helped me to be quiet, to sit down. And I'm not going to say it's easier when I'm retired because I'm still going nonstop. I mean, it's the way not unfortunately, but I think that's part of me. And I don't think I'm running scared, perhaps as I may have been in the past, but I am running because it's a great race. And oh, by the way, the sand is starting to drip out of the hourglass. And I see it's going faster. So I really want to, make a contribution of some sort, is an extension of the gifts that God has given me. And so that's where the writing comes in and the communicating and all the teaching and stuff. With that said, I think discernment helps me sort through priorities. And when your priorities are out of balance, you're out of balance. And so that's where discernment is kind of a important tool or a way in which I sort of walk and talk.
All right. So I think we would be remiss if we didn't ask. Define discernment for you is what?
Separating out what's important, what's not important, separating good, bad, right, wrong, do this, don't do that. Is that enough of a definition? Are we landing the plane? I mean, is that enough of a definition?
I have no idea because I don't have it. So that's why I was asking. I was trying to Google really quick, what is discernment?
Did you really?
Definition. No,
well, it's not necessarily.
But that's why I'm asking is for you, because again, I think to your point, we misuse words.
Sure.
We don't use words properly. We misunderstand words. And I think part of our culture right now is we're not on the same language. You talk about Latin. I mean, you know what I mean? I think sometimes I'm speaking, Portuguese and somebody else is speaking, you know what I mean?
Yeah, hip hop.
So,
yeah.
Perhaps, or the message, whatever. Yeah. I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is I think so many times we think we know what the word really means. And then we look it up and we're like, whoa.
Yeah.
I don't think you're using that the way you think you are, to quote Princess Bride.
Yeah.
So help me with that. What is Robin's definition of discernment?
So it is not necessarily cautious or being careful, but again, it is more intentional in terms of the way to live this life that follows Jesus and to keep, again, the eye on the prize sort of thing. When I said I was running scared and now I'm running more, it's more towards the goal. The phrase from Scripture that the harvest is rich, but the laborers are few. Boy, oh boy, so true. I mean, please do not give your brother-in-law my email or my contacts, but he's the kind of guy, I mean, that's my harvest. I mean, those are the people, this next generation, Neil, is not driving me crazy, but I do hear a cry for help. I don't know if I said this to you in one of our conversations, the surveys that are taken now, the polls of this generation. I don't know if you've heard the expression none, they're nuns. That means they circle none of the above. They're not part of a religious order like nuns, like the flying nun. They circle none of the above. They're not Muslim. They're not Islam. They're not Buddhist. They're not Jewish. They're not Christian. They're none of the above. Maybe this brings us back to you, brother-in-law, but they're none of the above. So are they atheists? Are they agnostic? What are they? Well, then they'll say to you, well, we're spiritual, but we're not religious. Okay, fine. But there's a lot of spirits out there. Can we talk about your spiritual life? And what spirit are you following? And this is where it kind of can get a little crazy and off the rails. By the way, the none of the above, and I'm not getting political here, Neil, I hope you hear this, but at the same time, Ukraine's on the mind of all of us. And I think of Russia, and I think of communism, and I think of circling none of the above. They have been either forced to, or many have circled none of the above. There's no religion. I mean, yes, you can say there's Russian Orthodox, but now you see Putin's there and he's blessed and everyone loves him. So you want to say, wait a second, there's no higher power. I mean, I think enough people know enough about the 12 steps or that kind of thing, where the first step is to, my gosh, at least admit there's a power greater than yourself. And so let's talk about that. Here again, I sound like I'm a travelogue, but I've been to East and West Germany. The difference between East and West Germany is night and day. I mean, it's crazy. And I won't go into great detail. I mean, West is party hardy, Berlin's alive and, big time social scene and all that kind of stuff. East Germany, dark, cold, hollow, empty. I mean, I honestly saw it with my own eyes, and that was communism. And they still have not recovered. What is it since they restored their relationship 20, 25 years later? I mean, it's a dismal way of life. Now, what got me started on that was back to you, when you first said, okay, where are we going with this? And I think this is why it's so important to me, especially when I talk about discernment and want to really work this through, particularly with the next generation, which this isn't a plug for my third book, though it sounds kind of shameless. But my third book is really again, a letter to the church is the title of it, a letter to the church and the next generation, because my passion really is for these kids who right now are kind of spinning around, especially after COVID. And now you throw in Ukraine and then all the other stuff that's going on. You hear the passion?
I do. And to me, if I was going to read the room, if we were at a coffee shop in Chapel Hill, because it's easier to go to Chapel Hill than it is to go to Louisville, apparently, direct flight. But if we were in a coffee shop, I feel like in this moment, I would read the room and say to you, here's a guy that has spent his whole life wanting to make an impact, wanting to have people know the divine, wanting people to have this renewal, wanting this discernment to come over them to realize what they've always done can't continue to always be done, that they really need to be instead of none of the above, they need to be in the above. Part of the above, if I can use your... You're preaching. Your metaphor in some respects. But they truly need to discern in their heart what you're saying is truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part right now is people don't want to hear truth. They want to hear half truth.
It's your truth. It's whatever your truth is.
Exactly. My truth, your truth, hashtag truth, like truth with me. Exactly. But they don't want to hear the pure truth, I guess is a good way to say it. But I want to ask one last question, then I want to play a game with you because I know you're a game guy and you love games and you love to have fun. So we're going to get to that. But I got to ask you this question because it's been plaguing me since we first started talking. You know this better than I do. I'm sure of it because I was not around when this happened. But there was a guy in Berkeley, California that took a bunch of his people to Guyana, South America. And roughly 500 people plus women and children died. It is the biggest, massive religious suicide event that ever took place. And it wasn't even on U.S. soil. And the guy's name is Jim Jones.
Sure.
And people can go research him. I would actually love to meet a Jonestown survivor. There are a few.
Oh, God.
There's about 24 of them, I think, roughly left. But for me, still to this day, when I think about what Jim Jones did and the manipulation and the mind tricks and all this stuff that he did.
Sure.
I mean, you could throw David Koresh on top of that. You could throw in, other people that have done crazy things in the name of religion.
Yeah.
When you hear those things and your discernment kicks into gear, because it feels like that's maybe if you were to have a superpower, God says, here's your superpower. Maybe it is discernment.
Yeah.
How do you discern that? How do you reconcile that on a faith level? I know that's kind of a big question maybe, and I don't know,
it's not.
But what's your response to that?
Well, it makes me sick. Thank you very much. This is a nice note to end on. But it also, religion does get sick. There is sick religion. Okay. And religion that's not healthy. I saw it in the pastoral ministry. We're not supposed to, Jesus said, do not get divorced. And she shows up with a black eye and a puffed up lip. And obviously the guy's been beating on her. That's not a good marriage. And he's quoting the Bible to her. I'm the head of the household. I'm the man. You respect me. Where do you want me to go with this, Neil? I mean, it's bad stuff. And there's sick religion, and that needs to be cured. That sometimes is a therapist. That sometimes is an exorcist. More often than not, it ain't this chicken. Because I'm running. And by the way, I've gone into homes where guys have guns and all that kind of, and drunk. And so I've been there, I know my limits. My wife has said, don't you ever do that again. But in all seriousness, I mean, I think that's the dark side of religion. That's the dark side, but it's bad religion, and call it that. And recognize. I started out in the ministry working in Memphis. By the way, this was shortly after Martin Luther King had been assassinated. So you can imagine how crazy downtown Memphis was at those times. And where I was in an old cathedral. All we talked about was reconciliation. And because there was white flight, there was everything going on that left. Anyways, I worked at the Memphis. It was then called the Memphis Mental Institute. I was one of the associate chaplains as an intern. And I can remember, Neil, this sounds really gross, but a guy had taken one of his eyes out because he saw some dirty pictures or porn back then. I don't even know if it was what they called it back in the early 70s. It was called porn, but it was, he cut one of his eyes out because Jesus said, your eye is the temple of the body, and whatever you see, if it's not, okay. But you see that and you don't forget it. I mean, there again, sometimes back to discernment, it's discernment not only with the heart and not only with the body and not only with the relationships you have with others, but it's discernment within the mind and within the spirit, your soul. Our souls can become polluted and dirty, and that feeds us as well. So it's not complicated, but there's interdisciplinary ways of beginning to examine this understanding of discernment.
Well, I think so many times, again, people see things like that, or the people at the soldiers' funeral that have their signs up, and the abortion clinics and the, we're going to burn the Quran and, all this stuff. And it's to your point, that's bad religion.
Okay, Neil, do you have some good examples of good religion to end this show on?
So here's
please for
so
your
help
listeners.
me with this, because and maybe this is where we end and play our game. For me, when I hear religion, I hear rules, I hear rituals, I hear have tos, I hear you musts, I hear you can't do anything but this, right? But I have said for years, when I'm sharing Jesus with anyone, brother-in-law, customers, coworkers, whenever I get an opportunity to stand in front of podcasts, whatever, I am in a relationship with my wife, very similar to my relationship with Jesus.
Okay.
I try my very best, and she'll probably nudge me for this one, but I try my very best to do everything I can to honor and support and love my wife.
Sure.
She asked me to mow the lawn. I'm going to do my very best to get it done, even though it's the worst chore on the planet.
Does she usually mow the lawn? Oh, okay.
No. We have a buddy that said if he ever sees her mowing the lawn, he's going to take my lawnmower back because he gave it to me. You know what I mean? Like, that's the worst chore for me is mowing the lawn.
Okay.
Right? And it's created a lot of challenges, and she'll probably pinch me for that too. My point is that I try to do everything I can to honor and respect and love her. And when there is a distance, when there is something that I've done, I do my very best to reconcile as fast as I can, because it's about a relationship. I want to have a relationship with her. I want to love her and honor her and respect her.
Okay.
Again, I guess that's what I'm asking. A relationship different than religion in your mind?
Yeah. Religion, here we go with words again, literally means to tie together or bind together. I see a ring on your finger. Is that a wedding ring?
Yes, it is. It's actually light blue. So.
Okay. All right. There you go. Where I'm going with this, Neil, is it's bound you together. It's a symbol. It's a sign. And so, when I get kids, we'll say they're spiritual, but not religious. I'll say, okay, tell me about your spirits. Tell me about the spiritual life. I'm both spiritual and religious. And the reason I'm religious is because it binds together or ties my spiritual life to me. And I find a good spirit that we call the Holy Spirit, who relates and unites us to the will of God. So it's a good spirit. It's a good relationship. It's a good religion. And I wish we could talk about this, Neil, and give examples about good religion instead of these people you brought up and ruined the whole podcast. But other than that, let's land this plane.
Well, yeah, again, I think that's so true. And so maybe that's where we pause it to say, hey, if somebody really is excited about having more of a conversation with you about the difference between maybe religion and relationship, or so many other things that
or good religion and bad religion,
or good religion and bad religion. Yeah, thank you for that. How can somebody reach out to you? What's the best way someone can connect with you?
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that. Robin T is in Tom Jennings, JENNINGS.com. And then there's a / guided reflection. And what I offer is a free download 40-day journal. Really provides an understanding of witness as well as renewal, which we've talked about, then vision, having a vision for your life. So you put those three things together. And then finally, the last piece is mentoring, learning to be a mentor to others, which I think is the name of the game too.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're curious about that, if you didn't get all that written down, don't worry, we got you covered. They will be in our amazing show notes that are created each and every week. So
there you go.
So Robin, first off, before we play our game, just want to say thanks again, man. Appreciate you coming on. And
Neil.
This is fantastic. And you're fantastic. And I just love our chemistry. So good stuff.
I could keep talking.
I know.
You know that.
So here we go. So it's our game called Senseless. So I did, in honor of you coming in today, I tried to get a Kentucky Wildcats cup, which is really hard because my search engine's like, are you sure you don't normally search Kentucky stuff? Google tells you that.
No.
You've never searched this before. Are you sure you want to search it? And I tried to get even a Louisville Cardinals cup because I know, being kind of maybe a Cardinal in some respects, the religious kind and the fan kind. Okay, maybe not too far. But I couldn't. They apparently don't sell them. So I got this instead. It's the North Carolina Cup. It is broken. It is a broken vessel, by the way.
So it doesn't work.
Because it is sanctified because it's a broken vessel. All right. So
okay. Sanctified.
All right, I'm going to roll. Are you okay if I roll for you? You don't think I'm going to cheat you?
Yeah.
There's a die.
What's in it?
And it's a...
Okay. And what's
so I'm going to roll this die.
Okay. Am I betting?
Senseless. We ask these silly questions at the end of the show. There are 5 sense questions, and then there is a 6 kind of wild card. So here we go. Just a funny way we like to end things. And you got number 6, which I was kind of hoping you'd get number 6. So you have to take my word for it. All right. Number 6 is theirs.
6, 6, 6, 6, 6. That's not good.
6, just
careful.
6. We're just sticking with 1 6. Which I think LeBron James wears right now. But anyway, so back to you. So number 6 is this. By the way, one person. Don't try to sneak 2 in here. One person you would love to spend the weekend with, and what would you do?
He or she. Wait a second. I'm too old for
this. One person.
No.
I don't care if it's here. I don't care if it's here. Wow. Okay. I don't care. So one person you would love to spend the weekend with, and what would you do?
Neil, it's interesting that you said this. Sadly, our son that died, his name was Ben Talmadge. I don't know if you've watched the series Turn on the American Revolution. It's about Ben Talmadge, who's Colonel Benjamin Talmadge, who was Washington's associate, as in George. And the interesting thing about Talmadge is that he developed a spy ring that really broke up the English offensive and probably made Washington, as well as the American Revolution, victorious. And he was the guy that single-handedly went after Benedict Arnold. So there's a lot to that story. But that's my boy, Benjamin Talmadge, that I'd love to spend some time with. And I guess you know the T for Robin T is for Talmadge. So we're brothers.
I didn't actually. I thought it was Thomas. So
yeah, no, Thomas was the doubting one. This is Talmadge who saved the country.
Who saved the country.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I never knew about it. Okay, so what would you guys do together? You know, you talk about getting a weekend with him. So we'll go Friday morning to Sunday night. That's your weekend.
We'd spy on other people. I don't know. Talk.
We talk.
You know, it would really be a fascinating time to interview and be present with us, as well as then his hope for the country, his desires for the future. By the way, his dad was a Presbyterian minister, got shot up and all that kind of stuff. It's martyred, really.
Well, Robin, again, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. Really, truly appreciate it. You are a man of many words, as you mentioned.
Well, what do I win? What did I win? Just a number 6? That was it?
There's no winning. Yeah, nobody's ever pushed on that. They're like,
this is a prize show. Yeah.
It's kind of a lame game.
Thanks a lot.
I don't know why I call it a game, because I guess it's chance. Yeah. Maybe that's part of the game.
Yeah, usually you get a prize at the end if you play a game, you know.
So guys and gals, kids and campers alike, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. I don't know about anybody else. Again, when you come across somebody that kind of challenges what you think, it kind of pushes on what you've always believed in, what do? Do you run, turn the other direction and just say, well, that was fun, that was awesome, I'm done talking now, we don't agree, we can't agree, we're done? Or do you kind of lean in? Do you press in and say, well, I want to know more, I want to understand more? It's nice when you can come to the table and have that kind of understanding. And let me tell you, today, I think we got that. Now, for some of you, you might not like the fact of what Robin shared. I get that. I don't understand it, but I get that, I guess, on some level. But for me, again, when I think about conversations that we're having or not having right now in this day and age, I think this is a great conversation to have. But I want to challenge you, and I guess that's maybe what I'm leading into, is here's my question to challenge you on today, is when's the last time you really stepped out in whatever faith you're in, whatever belief system you have, and said, listen, I'm going to go seek out someone that doesn't believe what I believe, and I'm going to have a conversation. Not to convince, not to say you're right, I'm wrong, or vice versa, but to sit down and have a conversation and have a commonality, to have a conversation, to have a communion, and see what happens. Let me know if you do that. I would love to know. OPSpodcast.com is a great place to let me know. Obviously, let us know on the social medias at OPS Podcast Show on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And last but certainly not least, do not ever forget. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned till next week when we walk in other people's shoes.